welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling a belief many of us probably encountered, growing up. The idea that real learning, deep learning, mainly happens when students discover things for themselves.
That classic aha moment.
Exactly. And that direct teaching, being explicit about things, might somehow dampen creativity or maybe feel less, authentic. You might even remember teachers encouraging you to just explore and find the answer.
Yeah, that hands-off approach was certainly popular for a while.
But what if that assumption, well-meaning as it is, isn't always the best path? Especially for learners who might approach things a bit differently.
That's the crucial question.
So today we're diving into a really intriguing computational study. It's from the University of Haifa, and Carl Hendrick explored it brilliantly. It gives us some, profound and maybe even surprising insights into how different brains actually learn and why clear, explicit guidance often isn't just a nice to have, but sometimes it's absolutely essential. Our mission here is to pull out the key takeaways for you, the listener, especially if you're navigating educational choices, maybe for your kids or even for yourself.
And it's fascinating because for such a long time in education, the thinking was sort of, if students struggled, especially those with learning difficulties, they just needed, more time, more freedom, let them explore.
Right, more discovery time.
Exactly. But this often led to teaching that was, as the source material nicely puts it, low in expectation and high in sentiment. The intention was good, right?
Yeah.
Foster independence.
Sure, nurture curiosity.
But what's so powerful about this new evidence is how it really shows the specific cognitive burdens, the hidden effort that unguided learning can impose. It forces us to rethink what really supports learning for everyone.
Okay, so let's unpack how the researchers actually set this up. Because it wasn't just a simple memory test or something.
No, not at all.
They designed a pretty sophisticated learning task, one that was meant to mirror the complexity you find in the real world, which, as the research points out, is quite different from the usual sanitized laboratory conditions you sometimes see.
A really important distinction.
Yeah. So participants had to figure out which features in these kind of multidimensional things they were shown actually predicted getting a reward. You can think of it like maybe a student trying to grasp a complex math concept. Not just memorizing steps, but really seeing how the different parts interact, or maybe trying to understand what makes an argument persuasive, the structure of it, not just repeating points. It required real problem solving. They weren't spoon-fed.
Absolutely. And this is where the design gets really clever. They had two main conditions. One was the explicit assist condition. Here, participants got clear instructions up front.
Like a teacher pointing something out.
Exactly. They were told which dimension, which feature to focus on. Just like a teacher might say, okay, look closely at this part of the formula first, or the key evidence is here, direct guidance.
Got it. Yeah.
Then the other condition, no explicit assist. Here, they were basically on their own. They had to discover the patterns themselves. That's your classic discovery learning setup.
Okay.
Now, what was really striking wasn't just if they learned, because most people did perform above chance in both groups. They picked something up. But the computational modeling, looking under the hood, showed that their actual cognitive processes, how they were learning, were, fundamentally different. Even if two people got the right answer, their mental journey could be vastly different.
Wow. So the end result doesn't show the whole picture of the effort involved.
Precisely. It shows why just looking at, say, a test score can be misleading about the actual learning process.
That really is fascinating. Okay, let's zoom in then. What did this study reveal specifically about students with ADHD? The researchers talk about a discovery tax. What does that actually mean maybe for a parent trying to understand why their child struggles in certain situations?
Right, the discovery tax. It refers to this significant extra cognitive load that individuals with ADHD seem to face when they were in that no guidance condition.
Okay.
They could learn when given explicit direction, their performance was fine then, but take away that scaffolding, ask them to discover the pattern, their performance dropped quite significantly.
So they paid a price for having to discover it.
Exactly. Imagine sending someone with ADHD on that scavenger hunt we talked about, but with no map. Just find the treasure. They're not just looking. They're using up so much mental energy just trying to figure out how to look, what's important, what's a distraction.
All that extra processing before they even get to the learning task itself.
That's the tax. That constant internal sorting and prioritizing, maybe second guessing, it's cognitively exhausting and crucially This wasn't about intelligence.
Yeah, you mentioned the modeling showed something deeper.
Yes. The modeling suggested that in that unguided situation, individuals with ADHD tended to rely more on simpler reinforcement learning, kind of like trial and error, push a button, see what happens.
Okay.
Whereas their neurotypical peers were more readily using what's called optimal Bayesian inference strategies, which is basically the brain's more sophisticated way of learning. It's like being a good detective.
Integrating clues.
Precisely. Constantly updating your beliefs based on prior knowledge and new evidence. It's efficient. But if you're already spending a lot of cognitive energy managing attention and filtering things out, like someone with ADHD might in an unguided task, there's just less bandwidth left for that really high-level, efficient detective work.
So for a parent, seeing their child struggle in that kind of open-ended learning environment might not be lack of effort at all.
Not at all. It could be that the environment itself is imposing this tax, forcing them to use less efficient strategies simply because the cognitive cost of discovery is so high for them. The approach might be the barrier.
That's such an important distinction. Not capability, but cognitive efficiency and load. Okay, now let's shift to dyslexia. The pattern was different, you said, but just as compelling. What happened there?
Yes, for individuals with dyslexia, the unguided discovery condition led to something the researchers called heightened decay rates.
Decay rates.
Essentially, yeah, an acceleration of forgetting. It wasn't just that learning might take longer, it was that new information seemed to interfere more quickly with what they had already learned. Things just didn't stick as well.
Oh, wow. Like trying to build on shaky ground.
That's a good analogy. Imagine, trying to fill that bucket, but the hole keeps getting bigger. The very process of trying to learn something new in that unguided way seemed to actively push out what was learned before. Knowledge struggled to consolidate, to become durable.
Which explains why peer discovery methods can be so frustrating for them.
Absolutely, particularly for foundational skills. The research suggested it was like a double penalty. First, the cognitive demand of figuring out the pattern without guidance was high. But second, that very effort seemed to undermine their ability to actually retain what they were learning. It's like the harder they tried in that specific context, the faster the learning faded.
That sounds incredibly difficult.
It really does. Now, explicit instruction didn't make the dyslexia disappear, of course not. But it significantly lowered the cognitive load during that initial learning phase.
Right. Freeing up resources.
Exactly. It allowed them to direct their mental energy toward consolidation, toward making the learning stick, helping to fight that rapid decay. And this lines up really well with other research on dyslexia, showing challenges with consolidating patterns, needing more repetition, more reinforcement to make things automatic.
So for parents of children with dyslexia, that clear, structured approach with built-in review isn't just helpful.
It's often critical. It directly addresses that vulnerability around memory decay and consolidation. It helps build that solid foundation they need.
This really brings us to the crunch point, doesn't it? The implications for educational equity. Because these findings seem to challenge some long-held ideas about what's best for all kids. This is crucial for you, the listener, if you're involved in education choices.
It's absolutely critical because what this study strongly suggests is that when we insist on purely discovery-based methods, especially for students who learn differently, we might think we're offering rich, authentic experiences.
But we might actually be doing the opposite.
We might be inadvertently imposing these extra cognitive hurdles, the discovery tax, the accelerated forgetting that their specific neurology makes incredibly difficult to overcome. And crucially, this isn't about lowering standards or dumbing things down.
No, the study showed they could learn effectively.
Exactly. Students with ADHD and dyslexia learn successfully, often just as well as their peers, if they had the right support, the appropriate scaffolding, the explicit guidance. So the issue isn't the content, it's the method of delivery asking too much simultaneously.
Precisely. Unguided discovery basically asks them to juggle two things: master the new content and manage cognitive processes like attention, working memory, or consolidation that their peers might handle more automatically. That's like that marathon runner also juggling.
An unfair cognitive burden.
Right. And if you think about equity more broadly, this insight is huge. Explicit instruction and scaffolding become tools to remove barriers. They let students focus their mental energy on the learning itself, not on fighting inefficient processes.
And this isn't just about diagnosed differences, is it?
No, that's a really important extension. Think about students from disadvantaged backgrounds. They might lack some of the prior knowledge, the vocabulary, the sort of cultural capital that other students might implicitly use to navigate a very open-ended discovery task. Explicit teaching helps level that playing field too, making the implicit rules of the game clear for everyone.
It's about making thinking accessible, not doing the thinking for them.
Beautifully put, yes. Okay, so this research is powerful, but we should touch on the limitations, as with any study. You mentioned the participants were adults, right? 20s. And the group sizes were relatively small.
That's correct. Around 20 adults per clinical group, plus controls, not huge numbers.
So, given that adults, small samples,
Right.
why should we still put so much weight on these findings, especially when thinking about K-12 education?
It's a fair question, but actually the fact that these distinct patterns, the discovery tax, the accelerated forgetting, were still clearly observable in adults is, in itself, quite significant.
How so?
It underscores just how persistent and fundamental these cognitive differences can be. They don't just disappear after childhood. So if these challenges endure into adulthood, it really highlights how vital it is to get the instructional support right early on.
To prevent those difficulties snowballing over years of schooling.
Exactly, to build strong foundations from the start. While yes, we'd love to see larger studies with kids in classrooms and that research is happening, these findings give us a really valuable theoretical model. They reveal potential mechanisms that help explain why some approaches work better than others for different learners. It informs how we can design better support, even if we need more studies to confirm the scale in children.
That makes sense. It gives us a why to investigate further. So this research really pushes us, whether we're educators or parents, to ask some tough but important questions. Like, how do we actually design teaching that gives that necessary explicit guidance, but still encourages students to think for themselves, to be independent, to stay curious? That's a balancing act.
It absolutely is.
And how do we intentionally build in the kind of review, the systematic practice that helps those students who might experience that faster forgetting, that decay rate?
Crucial for consolidation.
And ultimately finding that sweet spot, right? Managing the cognitive load so learning is possible, but still keeping tasks challenging enough to push all students forward.
Finding that optimal challenge point for each student.
So when we boil it all down, this deep dive really underscores that effective teaching isn't about picking a side in some, explicit versus implicit teaching debate.
No, it's much more nuanced than that.
It's about really understanding the cognitive demands baked into different ways of learning, and then carefully, thoughtfully, matching the support we provide to what individual students actually need to succeed. Recognizing that for many learners, explicit instruction isn't a limitation, it's the launch pad.
Well said. It's the structure that enables freedom, in a way. And that leads to a final thought, perhaps, for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Reflecting on all this, what does it make you think about the learning environments you went through? Or the ones you might be involved in choosing or creating now, maybe for your own children? How does understanding these potential underlying processes, this idea of a discovery tax or an acceleration of forgetting, how might that shift your perspective on what makes learning truly effective, truly equitable, and truly lasting for everyone?
That's definitely something powerful to consider. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration has given you some valuable new insights to think about.